So let's do the yoke. This is not going to take very long. Okay? As I explained to you when we looked at the shirt, the yoke is going to go a little bit into the front. That's why I didn't make a copy of matching this one until we actually take the yoke off, right? And we are going to go into the back, okay? So let's do the yoke first because it's really, really, really simple. Anybody brought Scotch tape? Is there a Scotch tape?
There's some right there.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tape the shoulder. So I'm going to cut exactly here on the shoulder. Now that we have the shoulder line already balanced for the sleeve, I'm going to cut here on the shoulder and I'm going to tape it. And that's going to be really great because I'm going to be able to see if I nicely trued this. Okay? Now, foreseeing what's going to happen later, before I do anything, I know that my armhole fits my sleeve, so I don't have a problem with that. I'm going to take 2 measurements and I'm going to save them for when I do the collar. The first one is going to be from the center back to the shoulder, and then the next one will be from the shoulder to actually the edge of our shirt. So remember that I explained yesterday, right? That the buttons is the center front, and then from the buttons it extends to the placket. So what we're going to do is we're going to add 3/4 of an inch, so that will be the edge of our shirt. Okay? So this is not your new center front. This is the edge of the shirt after it's finished sewn. Okay? Your center front is always going to be your buttons. I'm doing this just so you guys understand that. Everybody okay? And I'm going to square it off the neckline until that edge. I don't want to continue going the curve up if you put your
Sure.
French curve or your hip curve or whatever it is. So we have the edge of the shirt. On the next video, in a little while, we're going to come back and we're going to create the placket for the right and the left. Okay? But I don't want to create that. I was going to make a copy of this facing the other way. So we have a right and a left. But then I remember that I have to do the yoke. So let's do all the corrections on how it's going to be done to then do that. Okay? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to measure 1 inch from the shoulder line down. Okay? And that's where the front of the shirt will end. And by the way, I just talked nonsense because I talked about taking the measurement of the neck and I didn't do it, right? So let's take the measurement of the neck. So again, I'm bending my ruler and I want it to be exactly on that line. And I have for the back neck 3.5, and then from the front neck, remember I'm not measuring from the yoke seam, I'm measuring from the notch of your shoulder. We're gonna keep a notch so we can match the notch that is at the top of the sleeve. We're not gonna put the notch of the top of the sleeve where the yoke seam is. We're actually gonna put it where the actual shoulder line is. Okay? So now I'm going to measure the front. And up to the edge, I have 5 5/8. Please guys, you measure because you might have a different measurement. So 5 1/8 will be the front neck. So now I can go on. Okay? And since I know that it's been on that line, I know that this is truing beautifully. Yes? Now I'm going to decide where I'm going to place the yoke line for the back. Usually men's dressy shirts are going to be fairly narrow here, but I know that it's going to be a little challenging when you guys are going to sew it, so I'm going to make it a little bit lower. And remember, this is more of a embellishment. Some people like to have your yokes on the bias if you're doing, for example, a plaid. So your shirt has the lines vertical and horizontal, and if you cut the yoke on the bias, you're going to have them in a diagonal. Sometimes they do that on pockets, that you ask how to do a pocket, right? Sometimes you cut it on the bias. It's a little complicated to sew because the bias stretches, but it looks pretty because you have the contrast of being horizontal to the diagonal lines, right? But that's more of a design issue. So I'm going to measure, I think this is going to be a nice measurement. I'm going to measure 4 inches from the center back. And now I'm going to square off that line up to the armhole. Now, the shirt that I showed you yesterday, we actually showed you that I had a line because the dart was eliminated on that seam. But we did already eliminate the dart on the shoulder when we made this shirt a little bit oversized, right? So, here we go. This is your work in progress yoke. We haven't finished with it yet, okay? Now, for your finished back, you're gonna do the same thing that we did for the flare dress. Remember, we folded the paper and you put it exactly in the center back so you have one single back? We're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna come back to the back in a minute. Let's finish the yoke, okay? So, where would the grain line on this yoke be? Along the center back or across the center back? Why is that? Because most of the weight of your shirt, because of the sleeves, it comes across your shoulders. So the grain line will go this direction. So because we're gonna cut 2 yokes and we need to make sure that they're done properly, okay? I am going to make a full yoke and not half a pattern that says cut on half. Because by now you guys already figure out that that doesn't work with me, right? So I'm gonna draw a grain line right here. Okay? I'm gonna fold the paper. Let's see if this is transparent. I can match my lines. There. And then we can place our yoke on that seam. Okay? And we're gonna use pins so it doesn't move. Okay? So, this line is straight, so I have no problem with that. And by the way, you can change the design on how it's cut. You want to make it rounded or whatever it is. You know, have you seen those Western shirts? They have kind of that point. Well, that's just embellishment. It is not made to change the shape or anything. It is actually to give it a different look. So I'm going to copy this here. Okay, and since this is not transparent and I'm not looking through it, I'm going to use my tracing wheel to transfer it, and then I'm going to copy it. That's my armhole, and here is my neck. Well, here is actually the shirt's neck, it's not my neck. Okay, now make sure you do not forget to mark where the notches of the shoulder line are, okay? You're going to have trouble doing the the collar, and you're gonna having really big trouble when you're attaching the sleeve. So I'm marking this with the tracing wheel, okay? So when I take this off, I have the notch right here. I have the notch right here. That's a shoulder line, okay? And then I can go ahead and trace the neckline. And then the armhole. If you ever use this ruler and see how it doesn't do it all in one swoop, just do little parts and then connect them until they blend in softly and easy. Okay? Cool?
Yes.
So now I'm going to add seam allowance. And the seam allowance that we're going to do is, I think that it'll be easier for you guys to do the flat felt stitch. So we're going to do, I'm just thinking that maybe we should do 3/4. No, let's do just half. It'll be just easier. So we're gonna do half everywhere. Okay, so now I need to transfer the notches of the shoulder line. So remember, I'm gonna place it along the shoulder line and I'm gonna transfer them into here. Even though here, I should have done it like this. Always 90 degrees from the actual seam, okay? So after I did this, since I need to have a full copy, I'm going to cut it. I'm gonna make sure that I transfer the notches from the other side. Okay.
What seam was it that you wanted us to, like what stitch did you want us to do? For
Flat felt. Okay. So this is your grain line now. Okay. So this is gonna be shirt, back. How do you spell yoke? Oh my God, people are paying attention. I'm not gonna be able to sleep tonight. Okay, from excitement. Here on the center back, make sure you make a notch. Okay? And also mark the seams back on the other side because we cut it on the fold. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to do it backwards. The other way, I measure from the line out 1/2 inch. Now I'm measuring from the edge in 1/2 inch. And it will be the same. And we're going to do the same system when we do the collar, because we need to cut a couple of them so we can have half a pattern. Even though at the beginning we will start working with half a pattern, eventually when we make the clean copy, you're going to have a full pattern. Okay? Here is your yoke. All right. So last thing before we end today, by the way, this is your work in progress. This is your finished pattern. Yes? Okay. So let's do the roundness of the bottom of the shirt. Okay? I'm not gonna make it too dramatic. Anybody knows why shirts are rounded and shorter on the sides?
So when you tuck it in?
Huh?
When you tuck it in?
Yeah, but why would be longer on the front and the back?
The way you move? Like,
The way you move. You tend to, the sides not as much, but the center comes out, and when you bend down, the back always comes out, right? So that's why it has that curve. I'm gonna do it very soft, not too dramatic, because it's gonna be a little hard to do the hem, so I'm trying to make your life a little easier, right? Sometimes are nice, right? But just to show you something, sometimes shirts will add a little triangle. Anybody knows what this little triangle is called? It's called a gusset. Okay, you're gonna hear that word before. Again, gusset is G-U-S-S-E-T. Okay, where do you have gussets? Whenever you have a garment that it needs an extension, but the pattern doesn't allow you to cut it, right? So if you look at any of the garments from the 50s, do you remember, you've seen that they have like a diamond shape on the underarm, on the armpit, right? Okay, we need to look at clothes, okay? So that is called the gusset, and that would be the extension. Sometimes they use it also on the crotch of the pants, okay? So anyway.
would they use that for corsets and stuff too?
Say it again?
For corsets or no?
Gussets?
Yeah.
Sometimes, but that's more
I
embellishment.
thought that gussets like were...
No, that's a placket.
Ah, okay.
Yes. Okay. So let's go up maybe about 1.5 inches on the sides. Let's not be too overly dramatic. Okay. So we went up here 1.5. We are going to square that off, probably up to the middle of the shirt. Okay. And you know what? Let's do it easier. Let's do only one. I think 1.5 is going to be too hard for you guys to hem it later. So let's do only one. Okay? I feel like I'm nice today. I don't know what happened to me. So we're going to measure 1. Okay? And we're going to get the hip. Where is the hip ruler? Let me borrow yours for a second. Thank you. So we're going to start from the center front, and we're going to keep this 90 degrees, okay? Kind of slightly up to here. And yes, this is eyeballing it. This is more of an embellishment, okay? And then I'm going to do the opposite, where the top of the ruler is on the 90 degrees straight, and then I'm going to blend that into that curve. So this is no. See how it's softly rounded? Okay, and we're going to do the same thing to the back. By the way, some shirts, they tend to have the back even longer than the front. not necessarily for ladies, because for women, your breast would lift up the front the same way that you need the extension on the back, and that's why it's even. But for men that usually don't have breasts, even though some people work out themselves too hard that they have bigger breastises, right?
Back muscles.
You tend to have it at least 2 inches longer in the back than the front, almost like a tail, right? And that way, when you tuck your shirt in, it doesn't come off when you sit down and get up. So we're gonna do the same thing on the back, okay? We're not doing it on the center back, we're doing it on the side. So we're gonna get the ruler and we're gonna do about 1 inch halfway. Then we get the hip curve. We place it on the straight of the line. And slide it here. Halfway. And then I'm going to blend it into here. And I'm gonna have a very nice tail on this shirt. Hold on, I didn't blend in this line well enough. Pretty? So let's just true it. Let's see how it looks when we place this side by side. Nice?
Beautiful.
Okay. So what you're gonna do next is you're gonna get your paper. You're going to place it on the grain line, the fold, and you're gonna copy the back so you can have a full back. Okay? I'm gonna show you from another pattern what is done. I'm like a cooking show. You open the oven and the turkey is cooked. Okay, I lied, I don't have it. Okay, but you guys can imagine, you're gonna have a full back. Okay? Now, when we come back, I'm gonna have a copy of this exact pattern facing the other way. Let me tell you what is the usual mistake that everybody does. You put a piece of paper on top of it and then you trace it. Guess what? You're gonna get two for the same side. You need to actually flip this down and then put a paper on top and then trace it. So when you open it, you have a right and a left. Okay? I'll see you in a little bit.